Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's hashtag Ask Sibs. And I thought I'd go for a very big, broad question around entrepreneurship and whether I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. There's various people I've been reading blogs and listening to podcasts and watching YouTube videos that are very sort of into entrepreneurship and business. And there does seem to be quite I don't want to say cliche because I always think the word cliche sounds a bit negative, but essentially that general trend that a lot of people are always saying they always knew they wanted to be an entrepreneur, and when they were, back in childhood days, that they were. Gary Vaynerchuk is a particular person coming to mind now, and he talks a lot about the sort of selling lemonade on a lemonade stand outside your house when you're really young, and it's sort of collecting and selling football cards, and basically the idea of having something that ends up being more valuable than what you paid for it, and selling it on and making a profit. And that, a lot of people do it with sort of eBay, when they declutter and they sell items. But all these kind of things are definitely entrepreneurship, and some people are doing it now as an actual adult business. But I think definitely there's this notion of children that are very into entrepreneurship. I think for me, it wasn't really that way. When I was looking at what I wanted to be when I grew up, I can remember I've always loved football. As I've mentioned a few times, I support Tottenham. And so there was always this, first of all, I wanted to play football for Tottenham. And then I was a bit more practical that being in a wheelchair probably wouldn't be very possible. But maybe I could manage the team. So there was that sort of aspiration. I've definitely, when I think about the books that I started to read in my late teens and early 20s, were very much political figureheads, business figureheads, and sort of social movement. Like I read a lot about Gandhi and Mandela and Martin Luther King. And so I guess in a way that points a little bit more to where my career started after university, where I worked at a not-for-profit charity, and definitely I've always had that passion for justice and fairness, which, definitely there's an intersection of entrepreneurship that is just and fair, but certainly more around those sort of social issues. I also remember going to my dad's office, and it was so cool that he had his own desk and his own telephone. And I really hoped that one day when I grew up, I would get my own desk with my own telephone. And again, when I worked at Scope for those 5 years, I indeed had my own desk and my telephone. So that dream came true in terms of the desk and telephone, like my dad. My dad's actual industry is insurance, and I think maybe I thought as a kid I'd go, again, just because my dad does, I might go into insurance. But I think when I studied economics and marketing, I was probably slightly pointing to a job in the city, the sort of general finance economics job. But I think it's pretty clear to say that self-employed entrepreneur side was not forefront of my childhood aspirations and the sort of books that I was reading. Just a quick side note that although I dismissed playing for Tottenham when I got to like 9 or 10 years old, I ended up playing wheelchair football in my mid-20s, just for one season for Tottenham in the Power Chair Football League. So that dream came true. And obviously, as I kind of mentioned, all of those social change and justice and fairness very much was that, as I sort of said already, but came true in terms of all these dreams and thoughts coming true. I think pretty much one way or another they all did, which is pretty cool and pretty powerful, to be honest. But yeah, I think that the entrepreneurship side, in a way, it came about when I was at Scope and I started blogging, and really just that personal sort of project. It wasn't ever meant to, in the beginning, to be a business, but I really enjoyed creating content, building a community, all the social media stuff that I talk about. And then that led to media opportunities and travel opportunities. And I think that because there were limitations of doing that at Scope, not because Scope were doing anything negative and blocking it, but my role was in sort of strategic fundraising, so just not connected to the social media side. There probably were opportunities coming up at Scope on the social media side, but yeah, I think I partly like the idea of not being in an office, of being my own boss, of being able to travel, and I guess just have more freedom and flexibility. And I'd say that's the point where the entrepreneurship route became more interesting and more exciting. But it wasn't for the label of being an entrepreneur, but like I've talked about the label of being an influencer. They are just words and they're just labels that we give to each other in society. But, for me, it wasn't to have an identity as an entrepreneur, if you like. It was far more about having a lifestyle that was better for my health, better to live out my passions, like I say, the travels and working the hours that I preferred, and I could pick up more clients and drop clients, and just sort of live off my own terms a bit more. I say nothing negative to my employers. It was just the fact of, that's for me where the entrepreneurship side had some pull factor. But then, of course, as I left the job and became self-employed, reality hit home. I had to bring in work, which wasn't always simple, to say the least. There were months where I was really struggling to pay the mortgage. This was when I was living in London, so the price of living in a flat in London was higher than, say, now I'm living in Cambridgeshire, not even Cambridge itself, but out in the sort of more rural part of Cambridgeshire. The house prices are definitely lower. I had to make rent, get food on the table, and that was very, 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 very stressful. But I think in the end, I sort of worked out what I wanted to do as a core business, as a product, as a service. Definitely very mission driven. It's always been about disability and inclusion. So I've done consulting, the magazine, Disability Horizons, the travel site, Accommable, which was sold to Airbnb, obviously now Purple Goat. And so, I think that having that clarity of my bigger vision and mission on a personal level was really, really important. Having that freedom and flexibility was important. And then bit by bit, I just learned through necessity of, how to sell, how to manage clients, how to deliver work. And then definitely more since Purple Goat started, we've been employing people on salaries. I say that because at Disability Horizons, we've got a lot of people working, but the business model was always quite difficult. Certainly when I was CEO, there wasn't a lot of funding to actually pay people. So we relied more on the volunteer model, which still was people management and all that kind of stuff. But it's a lot of upskilling at Purple Goat in terms of recruitment and managing people, that in terms of being on salaries and all the freelancers that we're working with and contracts, and so definitely lots of things I hadn't bargained for when I took that plunge to leave Scope. But while there were the difficult financial days and the generally tired days and the struggles, certainly those earlier part of my self-employment, where I lived in Spain and visited Japan and all other countries around the world, I did a lot of travel. That was a really big factor. And then I think, as we all know, because I talk more day to day about Purple Goat anyway, we are on to this massive growth model where we're working with more and more clients, but at a much bigger scale, and we're creating a lot bigger impact for disabled people and for inclusion, which is amazing. And so still learning, still growing, and I hope in another 10 years, 40 years, I'm still learning and growing. And I think entrepreneurship is definitely good when you're into sort of personal development and professional development, which I definitely have been. And I do still go back to those biographies I read in my early sort of 20s that inspired me to this sort of entrepreneurial life. So on some level, the dreams kicked in longer ago, and then the reality kicked in. It was just in case you wondered, 2011 I left Scope. So weirdly, it doesn't feel like it, but it will be 10 years in July. So I've actually been an entrepreneur for 10 years now. So it's a fair amount of time actually when all's said and done. But I guess that earlier point was it, wasn't through my childhood an obvious way that I would go. So it just goes to show, have dreams. If you really sort of believe in them, they tend to come true. And I don't think it was any different for me from everybody else. I think when we have something we really want to do, we tend to get there one way or another in the end. Obviously, for disabled people, the journey can be a bit more difficult and a bit more meandering, but we get there in the end. And yeah, so I think generally there's a takeaway of just dream big. Don't put yourself in a box. Don't always label yourself. For many people, being employed is exactly the right way for their journey and their life. And you can still be entrepreneurial. It's another point, maybe for another Q&A another day. But how to be entrepreneurial while you're in employment, I think gets overlooked. There's an entrepreneurial spirit that people have, even if they're not running and responsible for their own business. So definitely one for another day there. But just to quickly mention, Miles has said, what are you doing today, Martin? Well, at the minute, about to wrap up this live, and I've got a few interesting meetings coming up for Purple Gate this afternoon. And Chris, good to see you, Chris, saying, I would not say I'm an entrepreneur. I really did not want to work for someone else, but happy to work with someone else. And that's a really good point, Chris, because I think when I was imagining being my own boss, there was this sort of, I'll be an island and I'll do it all on my own terms. But obviously, as you say, you still have to work with people. You still have clients or sponsors or patrons, whatever type of model you have on the financial side. But and even if it's not about the finances, it's just generally good to partner and collaborate with each other. So definitely a good point there about to work for yourself can be good, but you still have to work with people thereafter. All right, well, that wraps up today. I hope you found my little chat on whether I always wanted to be an entrepreneur interesting. Tomorrow, so we're Wednesday today, catch up the days of the week. Tomorrow, it was Thursday at 11 a.m., I'm going to be going live. I'm going to share the image with all the details this afternoon, but it's for a really amazing charity that supports disabled entrepreneurs, and I'll be answering lots of questions, and they've got apparently a lot of people coming along to watch my Q&A. I think we're recording for sort of half an hour to an hour tomorrow, but then they'll share it afterwards as well. So I'll share that poster, that flyer, if you like, after this. But it'd be great if you want to come along and learn a bit more about entrepreneurship. All right, take care for now. Bye-bye.